I put some notes on your tables, so make sure you sit at a table with some notes, or just go find a table that has some notes and steal them. And that way you can follow along. We're going to talk about discipline and discipleship. I think this will apply no matter if you're a children's pastor, or worker, youth pastor, or worker. We all at times have services that are chaotic. Kids that can be out of control. Anybody ever been in a group where kids are out of control? Or is that just me? Okay? So how do we handle that? How can we keep that from happening is kind of what we want to talk about today. And give you some real simple basic things that I've learned in my life that I think if you put some of them into practice or create your own type situation, create your own environment with some of the guidelines I want to give you, will help you a little bit in that situation. So why don't we ask the Lord to help us, and we'll pray. And as I said, I had some notes on some tables, and then some of you came in a little late. So if you move around, if you don't have the notes, just go ahead and stand up and find a table that has them, and then you can follow along. Jesus, thank you for this opportunity to minister, Lord God, to speak your word and to share some thoughts. We pray today, Lord, in this room, that you would help us, Lord God. Help us to leave, Lord God, being more equipped in this area of making disciples, God. Your word says that we're to make disciples. And so, Lord, that's going to require that discipline at times. It needs to take place. So help us, I pray. Give us wisdom in this, in Jesus' name. Amen. So, discipleship and discipline. Most of us are aware that the Bible commands us or calls us or tells us that we're to go make disciples. The Bible doesn't say we're to go make converts. That doesn't say that at all. It says to make disciples. That was Jesus' last command in Matthew chapter 28. But what part does discipline play in discipleship is what we want to talk about. Most of you are probably aware that the root word of discipline comes from the same root word of discipleship. So there's something in common there. There's something in common between the two. I don't believe you can really do effective discipleship if you don't have discipline. There's no such thing as an undisciplined disciple. So we want to talk about that. And let me read to you out of Proverbs chapter 3. It gives us a biblical perspective on discipline and discipleship. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 11 says this. Verses 11 and 12. My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline. And don't be upset when He corrects you. For the Lord corrects those He loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom He delights. So, scripturally, discipline is part of discipleship. Scripturally, discipline is part of leadership. Even God Himself disciplines us. Discipline and discipleship go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. And the courage to enforce discipline and the ability to do it with love is a mark of a good leader. If you're able to enforce discipline and do it with love, I believe that's a mark that you're a good leader. Discipline is hard. It's difficult to discipline students. And confrontation is always painful. When you're dealing with a confrontational situation, it's always painful to have to deal with it. But both are roles of a leader. It comes with the territory. If you're going to be a children's worker or a youth worker, you're going to have to discipline sometimes and deal with situations. And I believe the key to discipline is learning to balance a few things. Let me tell you some of those things I think you need to balance. You need to be able to balance affirmation with correction. You've got to balance affirmation with correction. You also have to balance grace with truth. Love with limits, and support with boundaries. A great example that I heard about discipline, I'll share, that I think kind of draws you a picture. Let me show you this illustration. Imagine that you want to build a fence. You just had some new children. Maybe, your kids are growing up and you have 4 or 5 children and they want to play in the backyard and you don't have a fence around your backyard. And you don't feel safe that they're going to stay in your yard. They're going to wander maybe. And at the same time, you don't want a bunch of people you don't know wandering into your yard. So you decide, I'm going to build a fence around my backyard and around my property to keep my children safe, to keep them inside and keep strangers and weirdos outside. So you call up a fence company and you say, hey, I want you to come down. I want you to give me an estimate. I want to build a fence around my property. So the guy shows up and you go through the whole situation. I want a fence around my property, and you kind of explain what you're looking for. And the guy says, oh, no problem. We can do that. We can do that. We'll be out Monday to start. He says, great. So Monday shows up and you're kind of wondering, you're getting ready for to go to work, and the fence company doesn't show up and you don't think much about it. You go off to work. You come home and no fence company, no fence. The next day happens, and again they don't show up, and the next day happens, and again they don't show up, and so all week, and finally you just kind of like, you called maybe in the middle of the week, hey, I thought you were coming on Monday. They said, oh, don't worry, they're there, they'll be there, they'll take care of it, don't you worry. A whole week goes by, nothing's changed. And you're like, dude, what's the deal? And then all of a sudden, Saturday morning, you go out to your mail, you go out and open the mailbox, and there's a bill from the fence company. And you're like, wait a second, they didn't even build me a fence. And you look at the bill, and the bill is like 10 times you could ever imagine it would cost to build that fence. So you call the fence company up again, and you're like, hey, you just sent me a bill for this fence, and I don't even have a fence. And the guy on the other side says, sure you do. We built you that fence last week. You're like, no you didn't. He says, we certainly did. We built you a 1 mile fence all the way around your subdivision. Trust me, your fence, your house is enclosed in that fence. Now, so is all your other neighbors, but there's a fence all around your house. 1 square mile. And you're like, that isn't what I wanted. You're going, that's ridiculous. And the guy on the other side of the phone says, well, we have kind of a mindset regarding fences. We don't want our fences to be too tight, because boundaries too tight is not good for kids. We don't want them to be too tight. They need plenty of room to experience and to explore. And so we have a philosophy that all our fences should be one square mile around your house. What are you thinking? You're thinking that's ridiculous. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. So you get on the phone the next week and you go, dude, you're going to hire another fence company to come out. And they're like, we'll be there Monday morning. We'll do it. This guy shows up and he's like, yeah, we'll build that fence. And we'll be there Monday morning. So Monday morning you're going to go to work. They show up, and sure enough, he's there with his crew, and he starts building his fence. You come home from work and the fence is done. Only this time the fence is like 1 foot from your house. All the way around your house. There's barbed wire up there. There's alarms on it. There's security cameras. And you get the bill, and again, it's 10 times more than you expected, because you weren't wanting that. You were wanting just a simple fence around your yard. And so you call them, same scenario, only this time the guy says, well, we have a different philosophy regarding fences. Nothing's safe for children. Children shouldn't be able to do anything without you knowing what's going on, and you need to have complete control of them, and that whole mindset. And what do? You go, this guy's crazy. Discipline is like a fence, is the point. And you got to have the right boundaries. You got to have the right situation. And they don't need a mile square around your house. But at the same time, I don't know if we need 12 inches from your house either. Discipline is like that fence. If the fence is too tight, it will create a feeling that seems like our leaders are armed guards when they come into our children's church or into our youth service. How many of you guys know what I'm talking about? Where a kid comes in and these leaders are sitting on the back rows, and they're like the mafia, or whatever you want to call it, the enforcers. You get out of line, we're going to whack you. That's the fence too tight. But at the same time, if a fence is too loose and the boundaries become meaningless, it doesn't really matter anymore, and it causes chaos and frustrations, because no one in your group of children or youth or whatever really knows what the rules are, what the boundaries are. So there needs to be a balance between the two. If it's too loose, it's not good. If it's too tight, it's not good. So how do I create a balance that's healthy? How do we create and enforce a well-balanced boundaries in our ministry? Where should we put our fence posts? Where's the right place for these fence posts? What are going to be the rules for the ministry that I lead, so that it's disciplined and effective? So what I want to talk with you today, and then we're going to open it up discussion, because I'd love to hear some of your experiences. Maybe you could share with each other some areas in this area that maybe you found success. And I think we can learn from one another. But I want to share you seven things that I've learned about seven fence posts that I think would be helpful to have to create a well-balanced, safe environment for your ministry. And the first fence post is this: expect good behavior. Expect good behavior. Matter of fact, I think Mark said it earlier about expectations. We have too low of expectations with our children sometimes and youth. I think that's true. And I think when kids come, we should expect that they're going to behave, not expect that they're going to disbehave. We should expect that they're going to, be disciplined and know how to behave in a certain situation and not think the worst, but we need to think the best. And they have expected behavior and communicate our expectations to those students that are coming. That we expect that they're going to do this. Kids rise and fall at our level of expectations many times. If we expect that a kid's not really going to memorize a verse, even if we give them the memory verse, they're probably not going to memorize it. But if we create an environment where we really expect that these memory verses that we're giving out every week or whatever system you have, that they're going to really take them home and memorize them, you know what? You'll be surprised. Most of them will rise up to that level of expectation. That's proven in JBQ every week. I mean, I get amazed. I go to these JBQ tournaments and these kids memorize all kinds of stuff. Why? Because they've created a level of expectation that you can do it. You can do that, and they've created an environment that helps them do that. Now, I think it's the same with rules and boundaries and discipline. We have to raise the level of expectation. Plus, that helps our leaders with their attitudes. When there's an expectation that kids are going to, behave a certain way, good, our leaders come in with a better attitude, because now our attitude isn't like, oh man, here we go again. But it's like, hey, this is going to be a great service. This is going to be a great children's church. So that's the first fence post. The second fence post that I have for you is this: have a few simple rules that are based on a few simple goals. Few simple rules, a few basic goals. Don't waste rules. Don't waste rules. Keep them simple. I'll give you two examples. Here's the example that I used in the local church. We had 3 simple rules when they came to a service that I was leading. One was, everyone's going to have fun. We're going to have fun. Second goal was this: we're going to focus on God. And the third goal was, we're going to learn about God. So we're going to have fun, we're going to focus on God, and we're going to learn about God. And basically we had 3 rules that went with those goals. So the first rule was this: because we're here for the goal of having fun, everyone's going to participate. Because we have the most fun when everybody's participating. And everybody's a part of what we're doing. So participation was number 1. That was the first rule. That was the expectation. If you're here, you're going to be a part of what we're doing. The second rule was this: because our goal is to focus on God, we're not going to be going in and out during service. Because when kids are going in and out during service, other kids aren't focusing on God. They're focusing on who's going in and who's going out and who's going in and who's going out. And we laid that out very clearly to the students. When the service starts, we expect you to stay inside, because our focus goes on God. And then the third one was this: we're going to learn about God. Again, so the simple rule is this: no talking to your neighbor when someone's up front talking, singing, or praying. Simply put, you can't listen to 2 people at the same time. So respect the person who's speaking with the microphone. 3 simple rules. And we made those simple rules, we explained them, and we mentioned them, and we spoke them, and we raised the level of expectations that if you're here, that's the expectations we have of you. And you know what? They began to rise to that level of expectation because we communicated it. It wasn't enough just to have them and not communicate it. We had to communicate our expectations so they could meet them. I think here's another great example. We had Western Kids Camp last August. And our speakers were Jenny and Jeff Smith. And I still remember the 2 rules. What was the guy's name? That had that cool voice, and he was the old guy. Jeff did. But he was the rule guy, remember that? And the 2 simple rules that I remember coming out of him was, no walkie, no talkie. I guarantee you every one of those kids remembers that probably still today. That puppet came out, it wouldn't take them long to remember that there was 2 rules at camp during service. No walkie, no talkie. The kids knew, hey, we're not supposed to get up and walk around, and we're not supposed to talk. It was communicated, it was simple. There wasn't 15 rules, over here that, the 15 rules or the 10 commandments or whatever. It was simple that anyone could follow, and they understood why they were there. The rules were simple, and every rule had a purpose behind it. And I think that's the key. Let me give you the third boundary that I think, or third fence post, is this: State rules positively and explain their purpose. So now you have the rules, you're raising your expectation, but now you got to let the kids know or the students know these are the simple rules that we have to keep discipline in our service, and at the same time, this is the reason why we have them. You know, it can be very irritating to kids, to youth, to anyone to not know what the meaning behind the rule is. The why behind the rule. Kids are always saying, why do I have to do that? Why? That's, I got a 12-year-old, and that's a question he likes to ask a lot when I ask him to do something. Why? They want to know why. So give them the answer to the why behind the rule. This is why we have that. When you start the service, this is my personal experience. When we would start a service, we would lay out the expectations very clearly every time. We wouldn't spend a long time. We'd do it like in a minute. But I would say something like this. I would say, during this time we're going to have fun, we're going to focus on God, and we're going to learn about God. Because you're here today with us, we have an expectation that you're going to follow these 3 simple rules. And then I would go through these 3 simple rules. I am so glad you're here. And sometimes if it was students, older students, I might even say, and if that's not where you're at today, no one's going to look bad at you if you just slip out. We're going to take a quick break. Go get a drink and we're going to start. If you want to go home, this is the time to go home. Now, 99.9% of the time, no one went home. But they realized that we were serious. We raised the bar of expectation. That this is why we're here. And you know what? They went up to that level of expectation. Number 4, fence post. Enforce the few simple rules. Enforce the few simple rules. If a kid is not following the rules, warn them. But I encourage you to warn them only once. You don't want to get into this thing where you're warning them 15 times in 15 minutes. Or where all your leaders are going, shh, shh, shh. That's senseless. The rule doesn't mean anything then. You got to enforce the rules. And so my thing is warn them once, and then if beyond that, pull them aside and have them sit with you in the back, have them sit with a leader, whatever the case is. But there needs to be consequences if they don't follow the rules, and they need to know what they are. It's laid out real clear. Appropriate consequences. And you can only decide what the appropriate consequence is to the situation because you're the one in that situation. But you should be thinking it out beforehand and not waiting until the moment of emotion and heat where everything's blown up. But don't continue to warn everyone, but enforce the rules. And don't allow kids' behavior to ruin the service for everyone else. How many of you have ever been in a situation like that where there's 1 or 2 kids that seem to dictate how that service goes every time you're together? And all of a sudden, all your attention goes to that 1 or 2 kids, and there's another 15 to 20 that need your attention, but they never get it because it's all on these 2. That's not fair to the other 15, and I don't think it's really fair to the 2. And so, you got to enforce those rules, and you have to don't let the other ones ruin it for the rest of them. The point is to minimize the warnings. Unruly kids will never get the lesson until they change their behavior. If a kid's unruly in your Sunday school class and they're never paying attention, are they getting anything out of the lesson anyways? Absolutely not, and no one else is either. So bring control, bring discipline into that classroom, get the behavior lined up, then they can start to learn the lesson. Here's number 5. Know the difference between annoying and inappropriate behavior. And there is a difference between annoying and inappropriate behavior. Alright? Kids do annoying things. Tell me some of the things that kids do that are annoying in your class. Someone go first. Darren, I know you got a couple annoying things kids do.
I'm trying to pick one.
Give me 2 or 3.
Just talking out, just making a comment.
Okay?
Yeah, just blowing it.
Interrupting.
Yeah.
Okay? Someone else. Things that kids do that are annoying. Tapping the chair in front of them. Kicking the kid in front of them. Okay? Leaning back in their chair. What else do they do that's annoying?
Making weird noises.
Making weird noises. Pick their nose. Laying down on the floor when it's not appropriate to lay down on the floor, right? And I've had that one before. What else? Passing the chip bag back and forth, okay? Playing with their toys. I had a kid that in one of our ministries that You know, it may not seem annoying at first, but it becomes annoying over time. This kid had this behavior. I don't know why it was. Maybe he just never got touched at home. I'm not sure. But he had this annoying thing that he always had to touch everyone in the room before the night was over. I mean, and at first you didn't realize it. You didn't think about it. But over time you realize that he always has to touch me. Now, I don't have a problem with people touching me. I don't mind that at all. But it was just weird. You know what I mean? It was just annoying. But there's a difference between annoying and bad behavior or inappropriate behavior. Annoying is part of growing up. And usually the younger the kids are, the more their behavior can seem annoying. But the older they get, maybe they grow out of some of that annoying behavior, and it just becomes inappropriate behavior. Many times annoying things can be handled best if you'll simply have an adult sit next to the annoying kid. I'm not a believer in a children's church or a youth service or whatever that all the kids sit up front and all the leaders sit in the back like the bouncers. You know what I mean? I don't think that works at all. I think that sets up an example of the fence post being really close to the house. And it just doesn't create the environment that I think was healthy that I wanted. I would much rather have my leaders sitting amongst my students, sitting next to them, sitting in the chairs with them. And then if I saw some kids that needed some special attention because they were a little extra special annoying, I would talk to my leaders and say, can you sit with this person? I wouldn't make it obvious. I wouldn't say, hey, we're assigning this kid, this adult to sit next to you so you stop being annoying. I wouldn't say that. I would just do it indirectly. Because a lot of times that annoying behavior and even some of the inappropriate behavior can be dealt with really, really well if there's just an adult sitting next to them. Matter of fact, sometimes they don't even do anything that's annoying or inappropriate. They do it when there's not an adult sitting next to them. So that's an easy way to fix it. Inappropriate behavior must be addressed appropriately. Annoying behavior, sometimes we just need to ignore a little bit. You know what I mean? And not give it too much attention. Number 6, enforce rules without anger. Enforce your rules. So you've come up with your rules, you've given the expectations, you've warned, and now what do? Well, my best advice for you, first of all, is don't do it in anger. It doesn't help when you do it in anger. Rules are worthless if they're not enforced, so they must be enforced. But the key to discipline is to do it before you get angry or emotional. Stop the problem before it gets on your nerves. I remember once I went to camp, and I had some students that went to camp with me, obviously, and we went into the room, and I had put my sleeping bag and my suitcase on the bunk where I wanted to sleep, near the door, so I could kind of make sure kids weren't sneaking in and out. And I'm probably not the only one who's ever done that. And I put it there, and I said, this is where I'm sleeping, and I went back out to help unload the rest of the vans or whatever. Came back in to find my stuff all moved to a different bunk way over on the other side, and some kid had laid out all the sleeping bag, and basically this is my bed now. Well, I don't know why it bothered me so much, because usually I'm pretty calm, but that annoyed me. That upset me. And I took all the stuff, and I took it out, and I threw it in the hallway. Great leader, huh? I said, that's my bed, and I threw it all in the hallway. And you know what I had to do later on that night? Move all my stuff, put his stuff back on the bed, and say, I'm sorry. Because I did it in anger. It's not good to do things in anger. You'll regret it. You react to it when you're in anger. You don't want to react, you want to respond. And there's a big difference between reacting and responding. But when you get angry, you just want to react. You're impulsive. Do it before. I encourage you to do it when you can still say, I love you, but I'm not going to allow you to behave this way, and da-da-da-da-da, and you can do it with a smile on your face. You don't want to do it in anger. And then the final fence post that I would throw in here is this. Don't embarrass the student. Don't embarrass the student. We want students to lose their inappropriate behavior, not to lose face. We don't want to embarrass them in front of everyone else. I would encourage you, if there's a kid who has an inappropriate behavior and it's an ongoing thing, that you talk to them by themselves. Not in front of everyone that, hey, Joey, sit down, or I'm going to, make you go sit with your parents. I don't think that helps anyone other than it just embarrasses the kid or makes it worse. If you see that it's an ongoing problem with Joey, pull Joey aside after service or before service and say, hey, and start to talk to him one-on-one, and or even have another leader there and talk to him one-on-one. And if necessary, even involve his parents in the conversation about Joey. You should be allies with your parents. The reality is, if Joey's behaving bad in your class, he's probably behaving bad at home. And the parents probably don't know what to do with Joey either. So maybe you guys can partner together and help Joey through that time, and help mom and dad through that time, through all some of that emotion and some of those frustrations. But we're not here to embarrass them. We're here to help them learn how to behave and to be disciplined so that they can be discipled. Because you remember, you can't have discipleship without discipline. There's no such thing as an undisciplined disciple. So they work together. You're not going to be able to teach kids if the place is chaotic. So you got to have some type of environment that's learnable. Let me share one last thought here, and then I want to open it up to Q&A. And I have some questions I want to ask you too. But Doug Fields wrote a book called Purpose-Driven Youth Ministries. And he was a youth pastor for a long time down in Southern California. He said this about discipline, and I thought it was good, so I want to read it to you. He said, discipline is like a root canal. It's like a root canal. How many of you guys like root canals? Oh, yeah, no one. I didn't think anybody would raise their hand. No one likes root canals. So he says, discipline is like a root canal. It isn't fun, but it's good for you. Both are simple, but decisive procedures that keep decay from destroying a whole structure. Did you catch that? You do the root canal so it doesn't ruin the rest of your teeth. The whole structure, whether a mouthful of teeth or a room full of kids. We don't like root canals, but we get them done to protect the rest of our teeth. We may not like to deal with discipline in our classroom or in our children's church or our youth service, but we deal with it, and we deal with it appropriately so it doesn't affect the rest of the kids in the group, where you can't have an environment where kids can learn about God and hear about God, and other kids come in and feel welcome. Remember, there can be no discipleship without discipline. So I encourage you, create some fence posts. You know your situation, you know your environment, but create some fence posts. Look for balance, and then begin to communicate those expectations. Begin to create some simple rules that are easy to follow with some goals behind it, and then start following them and living up to them. And kids will raise that expectation. Youth will do the same. A lot of times they just don't even know what's expected because they don't see the fence. It's a mile away. Or they walk in and all the security guards on the front row, and it's not a very comfortable environment because the fence is so close. Anybody have a question or a comment? Yes?
What about those children that are not disciplined in their home?
That's a great question.
In your classroom, and they don't respect what you're doing because they don't do it at home.
I'll back up and say, even though they're not disciplined at home, I think the things that we've talked about, they can be that way, and it can be that way in your class. It just takes raising that expectation, enforcing the rules, having them simple. But I mean, kids go to public school and they obey a certain way. They live by what's expected of them, how to behave. A lot of times they don't behave at home because mom and dad aren't doing this. They don't care. The reality is easier not to do this than to do it. Well, yes and no, maybe or maybe not. Parent could. And again, that's why I said maybe we bring the parents in on the conversation so they're not blindsided. But a lot of times, my experience also has been that the parent is just glad that someone's helping them. And they're hoping that it will kind of bleed over into their home life. But, it's never easy. But I think if you begin to put some of those fence posts and you have some solid expectations and rules, this is what we're going to do, simple ones, and you start to do it, I think that you'll find that it will pay off in the end. It may be a little bit painful at the beginning, like a root canal, that it's a little painful when you do it, but over time you're like, man, I'm so glad, because if I didn't do this, I'd probably have to have many more root canals and many more situations. Yeah. Corey. I think, Corey, you're right. That's a good illustration. I can remember, that made me think of a time in my life where we had taken some kids on a raft trip. Lindsay might have been there, so she might remember. I don't remember if she was or not. Lindsay was a part of our ministry for a long time. And and it happened to be the pastor's son. And we were swimming after the end of the raft trip, we would go swimming. Corey knows what this is too, up by this waterfalls. And, it was safe as long as they followed the rules. They had to follow the rules. So we lay out the rules. This is what the expectation is. This is what you need to do. He chose not to follow the rules. And I remember looking back, and all of a sudden, I had told him, don't swim across there. Wait for everyone. And he didn't follow the rules. And so all of a sudden, I look back, and he's trying to swim across. And just as I said, don't do that, he starts floating down the waterfalls. These heavy-duty rapids. And in my mind, I can still remember to this day thinking, this kid's going to die. I'm going to have the first kid die in my youth ministry. And I was scared to death. And myself and 2 other leaders are trying to get to him, and we could not get to him. And thank God, before he went over the waterfall, he was smart enough to sit up and go down on his butt. And he went through the first set of rapids and waterfall that could have been very dangerous if he would have head first. And someone was able to grab him and pull him over to the side before he went down the next half. Now, this is my pastor's son, and so I'm a little worried what's going to happen when he finds out that his son almost died. And at the same time, I'm very upset with him, and he didn't leave my side the rest of the day because now we're going to discipline you because of what happened. And I got home, and the youth ministries has totally changed since, and children's ministries, I'm sure too, since the benefit of the cell phone. Something like that would not come out until you got home and you explained it. In the cell phone day and age, parents find out about stuff like that before you ever get home. Because they call mom and dad, or someone calls mom and dad, and guess what happened? So-and-so just about died. And I don't know if that's helpful or not helpful. I don't think it's real helpful sometimes. But regardless, I get home, and my pastor, who's also the parent of this kid, comes up to me, and he's apologizing for his kid's behavior. And for his kid's behavior not obeying. So sometimes we worry the worst, but it's not always the worst. But regardless if it's the worst or not the worst, I think we still have to do it because we owe it to the whole classroom. That's good. It's like letting the consequences be the paddle, if you would. There's another great book that has the same theory in it that you can write down if you're looking, especially for parents, called Have a New Kid by Friday. And it's by Dr. Lehman is the author. Have a New Kid by Friday. And we read it. And we didn't have a new kid by Friday, but there was some good stuff in it still. But really, maybe we had different new parents by Friday. It might be a better way because it teaches you a lot of those same principles that Mark talked about of helping kids make choices because they have to choose anyways. I mean, someday they're going to have to make a choice. We can't make all the choices for them the rest of their lives. Teaching them to make good choices and then the consequences, living with the consequences of whatever they are. Yes, Kyle.
Can you give me
Comment, point, question. Yes.
Can you give me the first 2 blanks?
Oh, you want to fill them in. You're like me. Expect good behaviors and have a few simple rules that are based on a few basic goals.
Sorry, actually above that it says if the fence is too tight, it can blank.
Yeah.
Oh. If the fence is too tight, it can create a feeling that seems like our leaders are armed guards who are just there to enforce all the rules. Is that the one you're looking for?
I was looking for one word there.
Oh, yeah. No, there's lots of words there. Sorry, I probably didn't give you enough room. Yeah, there's not one line. That's why I gave you a big long line. You can write it however you want. Okay? I didn't realize it was in. If the fence is too loose, the boundaries seem meaningless. Okay? Yes?
Before you started on the worksheet, you said balance affirmation with correction, grace with truth, and what was the last one?
Grace with truth and, grace with truth. Love with limits.
Say that again.
Love with limits. And support with boundaries. Got it. Well, I'm going to see some other people feed back into that, but I want to address something you said there a minute, because how many of you have pastors' kids in your group? Maybe in your Sunday school class, children's church, youth group. And let me just give you my advice on that. Can I? Something I've learned, and I believe that it can help you, because I've had pastors' kids in all my ministries that we've served in the local church. And it's simply this: when we're in public, we're in with the kids, we're in the youth service or the children's or whatever it is, everyone's equal. I don't treat that pastor's kid, I try not to treat that pastor's kid any different than any other kid in that group at that moment, in that service or in that outreach or on that. raft trip where he almost drowns, I would treat Kyle any different than any other kid that happened to. And I think that's important for the rest of the group to see. That the rest of the group to see that they're not treated any different because they're the pastor's kid. We're all equal. We're all valuable to Brian and Barbara. But let me also add, behind the scenes, I would give them some special love and some special grace. When we're not in public, I would maybe call them a little bit more than I might call another kid. I might take them out for a Coke a little bit more than I might take another one out. I might pray for them a little bit more. I might, give them a little special, extra attention and love from me because I realize that they have some unique things that they're working through. And so, does that make sense? So public, I want it to be, I don't want anyone to see me as favorites, but in private, I might give them a little extra attention. And also, they're my boss as kids, and I want to love my boss and support my boss and be a good second chair like you talked about. So I think it helps in that environment. But when I'm with them, and with every other kid, they're the same as any other kid on the block. So, but you had a question. So what was that? You had said disciplining non-church kids versus church kids. Does anybody want to respond to that? Anybody had to deal with that and work through it? If anybody can relate to that, anybody else have that problem in their group? Okay.
8 PKs in our
Okay. You got 8 pastors' kids in your group. That's going to create a little bit of environment. How many kids you got in your group overall?
30 on an average.
So a third of them are pastors' kids. Okay. And what I'm hearing you say is some of them have attitudes.
Are they teens?
Yes, church kids, she said, can be very critical. And you have a unique situation, too, that not all those pastors' kids are pastors in your church because they got more of a community youth ministry where one youth group in a small community and all the kids from different churches come. Is that correct? But that doesn't change his answer, and I agree that's correct, that you still develop. It might just take a little bit more work. I don't think I have anything to add to that. I mean, we did the same thing. Matter of fact, the only thing that I would add is that I don't know how you do it, but like for youth convention, we stayed in hotel rooms. And so we had an adult with 4 kids or 3 kids, and it was very natural to do it that way. Hey, you're responsible for these kids while you're here this weekend. And that included discipline. That included making sure that they were where they were supposed to be. It's a lot easier for one person to make sure 4 people are where they're supposed to be than me trying to make sure 25 of them are where they're supposed to be. So I would look to my leaders. Are all your kids here? Are all your kids here? And it helped. But I mean, that's exactly what I would recommend. Go ahead. Yeah, one more principle I would add into your mindset of ministry is catch kids doing things right, and let them know that you caught them doing it right. Sometimes it can seem like the only time kids get our attention is when we're correcting them. Much like at home, sometimes kids feel like the only time they get their parents' attention is when they do something wrong. So what do? They keep doing things wrong so they can have their parents' attention. That plays into, I think, even in the ministry. We need to be catching kids doing things right and say, hey, man, good job. Well, I love what you did there. Complimenting the right things, not just correcting the wrong things. And I found that if you compliment and catch them doing right, now they're getting your attention for the things that are right. They realize, hey, I can get Brian's attention and his compliments and his love and all that without having to get his attention to correct me. Does that make sense? So look for him to do right and then point it out. Man, good job. I love seeing what you did there. Well, we're going to finish, but if you want to stay and talk or come and talk with me or whatever, I'll be here. The prayer chapel's still open for another hour, so if you're like, what am I going to do for the next 2 hours until we start back up in here at 6? You can go down there and pray. You can go shopping. There's a mall right down the street. If you don't know Salem very well, you could take out here Lancaster, turn left. There's a big mall. We are going to ask you to move out of this room and all your stuff out of this room by 4:30 because we need to set up for dinner. So if you could help us out with that, if you could, you don't have to do it this moment, but in the next half hour, if you could grab all your stuff and you can hang out here as long as you want in the foyer or the lobby, and no one will bother you.